I'm presenting you the topic of my PhD research, which deals with the connection between the Medicean villas and the Tuscan landscape. I'll try to give a critical reading of the landscape, trying to represent the transformation through the centuries. I'll give you a brief introduction about the topics and of the thematic, which will go to from the general to the particular. I'll show you a brief summary about the different estate system in Italy, as we just see in the previous conversations. And then I'll give you a description of the historical period in which this phenomenon has take form. And then I'll show you my case study about a villa in the Mugello near Florence. The thing that I wanted to make important is the perspective of this research, that is to give rise to a new critical reading of the connection between villas, his historical garden, establishing a process of reappropriation of the cultural and also of the landscape heritage. I'd like to focus the attention also in the conservation project and on the protection regime. In fact, if we consider the system of a villa together with its historical garden, we can say that the agricultural lands all around the villa are part of the whole complex, but they haven't the same protection regime. My case studies will help to understand these differences. In fact, for example, in Tuscany, the suburban villas around Florence are protected, but we can't say the same for the landscape, which has been strongly transformed, especially during the last century, the 20th century. But I begin from a general view of the different estate system we can find in Italy. This morning, you've just seen a lot of Italian examples, and here they are summarized. And they usually consist in a principal villa with a huge property of agricultural lands, where we can find farms, stables, and all the other agrarian buildings, and also with different crops. The Italian regions affected by the phenomenon are located all around the nation, from north to south. And normally they are located in the countryside, surrounding the main cities, and the places where the phenomenon is most obvious and also most studied are the one I put in this map. So we can find in the northern part of Italy, Piedmont, Lombardy, and Veneto. And then in the central Italy, we can find a lot of examples in Tuscany, in Marche, and in Lazio. And then in the south of Italy, in Campania, near Naples, and in Sicily, near Palermo. And the villas, the system of the villas are very different from north to south. Also, the site changes every time. Sometimes we find villas on slopes, for example, Villa Mondragone in Lazio and all Lazio villas, and also in Tuscany. For example, all the villas near Lucca, for example, the Villa Reale di Marlia. And sometimes they are in plain, such as the Veneto villas and the Lombard farms. The phenomenon, especially in central Italy, is a consequence of a structural transformation of agriculture, which appeals to the consolidated system of sharecropping used during the medieval time, with some differences in its economic and the practical contents. In Tuscany, and during the Renaissance, we assist to a spread of the tree and shrubbery plantation in hilly areas that gave considerable financial advances to the oligarchy families. For example, if we take in consideration the Medici family, we can say that from the 14th to the 15th century, the Medici family began a new reorganization policy of the landscape with the modernization of road infrastructure and with draining of swampy areas. All these investments on the country estates become productive and gave an improvement also to the family social states. They were bankers, but they became also very near to the noblesse. So, as my case study, I've decided to show you just one villa. And I chose the Trebbio Villa, which is the eldest of the Medicean villas around Florence. And it is in the northern part of the Tuscany, about 25 kilometers far from Florence. This villa was the place of origin of Medici family. And here they decided to invest, to start their investment, and as a first step of their long story, just to demonstrate that they were very linked with their original land. So we can say that there are many Medicean villas around Florence, and they represent altogether a real network. So in the huge landscape, we can see this big network. Trebbio Villa, that is here, together with the Cafaggiolo, that is another ancient villa, is a positive example of a well-preserved landscape, perhaps because we are far from the city, and this kind of landscape, there is a mountain chain. To talk about the historical sources, we can say that Medicean villas has many historical sources. For example, in this map from 1931, we can see that the villas were drawn, and they suggested to visit all of them. This map was made by the architect Tommaso Buzzi in occasion of the Italian exhibition of garden in 1931. And to present the Tuscan landscape, they drawn all the Medicean villas in the countryside, so that who went to the exhibition could give a look to all these villas and visit them. All these villas are part of the World Heritage List since 2013, and they are 14, 12 villas and 2 gardens. But the number 14 comes again because we have a very important historical source made by Giusto Utens. We call them lunette. They are 14 lunette that represents every single Medici villas, and they were drawn in 1599. So they are very important because they represent not only an artistic testimony, but a precious storytelling of the rural landscape in that period, and also of the historical garden connected to the villa. Now I present you a critical reading of the Trebbio Villa and its landscape, analyzing firstly the transformation of the space next to the villa, and then to the huge landscape all around, from a garden scale to a landscape scale, and also the perception of the villa and the transformation through the century. The Trebbio Villa is an ancient one, and it was a medieval fortress. It stands at the top of a hill at about 450 meters, and it is not far from the road that connected Florence to Bologna. So it was very important also for communication. In fact, the toponym Trebbio seems to derive from a Latin word, trivium, which meant that there was an intersection of three routes since medieval times. Here we can see a photo of the ancient garden with this pergola that is original from Renaissance with these cotto columns. There were 2 pergolas and we can see them also in the Lunetta by Giusto Utens, but now we can see just one. And Trebbio became the first nucleus, the first central villa of a huge estate that was made up of more of 28 farms. And here we can see the landscape around the villa, characterized by country roads and cultivated lands with horses and cattle. And there are two examples of the farms which were linked to the villa. Here we have Doccioli Farm and Vivaio Farm, and we can say that all these farms had the same construction, and they were usually next to the roads that connected all the property of the villas. And there was the building where the peasants lived, and usually there was a stable and a barnish. Here we can see the network of the villa that was strictly connected with all the farms all around where peasants live. And here we can see the main road that reached the villa, and all the small farm in the middle of huge properties that were cultivated. Every farm had their crop, and the viability and the roads remained in this way for all these years. And here we can see the transformation of the villa and of its garden. We start to look at the space next to the villa, and in these three images we can see a zoom of the Lunetta by Giusto Utens, in which we can see the ancient garden, historical garden, which was closed with walls, and it had two pergolas and a kitchen garden inside. So this represents a very ancient type of garden. And if we consider other Medicean villas, we can remember other type of garden that has transformed during the 15th century. And the perception of the villa changed a lot in this through the centuries, because in the Lunetta it was very visible, while in the current view we can see that around the villa were planted a lot of cypresses and a lot of evergreen trees. So the perception of the villa from the valley changed very much. But we think that also thanks to the second images, that is a detail of an historical plan from 1650, that in the 18th century it was everything. It was free from trees. So we can say that cypresses and evergreen trees had been planted during the 20th century, when the villa was bought by an American woman who decided to plant cypress, because in that period in Tuscany everybody planted a lot of evergreen trees and cypresses, and the general record of Tuscan landscape was done in this period. Here we can see an ancient plan that is the same of the last one, but here is the complete plan from 1750. We can see all the roads and all the crops, and every agricultural land is linked with his farm. And watching to a current orthophoto from Google Maps, we can notice that the roads, the viability, and the division of the properties had remained substantially the same. So for this reason, I said that this is a positive example because there are not so many differences that occurred through the century. Here we can have a detail of the crops. In the ancient plan, that is a cadastral plan, we can see that around the Trebbio villa there were many cultivated fields, many vineyard, olive trees and fruit trees. Then there was a strange thing because we find a cornfield in the north part of the villa, at the foot of the hill where there was a wood, and this cornfield is now is no more there. So we lost this this small cornfield, and now we can see in its place a wood. But in general, for example, in the vineyard near Trebbio Villa, we can still read the presence of a vineyard or olive groves, and also the woods remain there. Just a building that was the lime furnace disappeared, and we have no trace of it. But in general, we can say that nothing has changed too much. So, also in this cadastral plan, we can notice that either the buildings and crops has really maintained all the features, and we can recognize quite everything in the current elements. So we can still clearly distinguish the cultivated fields, the woods, and in some cases, some fields have became woods, but even the structure of the land has remained generally unchanged over the last century. So I've finished. Thank you very much.